The Boundary Trail Scavenger Adventure. Finding true north when the path gets loud. On the first whistle, 8th graders sprinted into the pine-bright trail with maps flapping like little flags. Anaya's pack thumped lightly. Pine needles cushioned her steps. Mateo ran just behind, hoodie sleeves pushed to his elbows, breath white in the early chill. Boundary Trail Park opened ahead, twisting paths, posted markers, and a promise of bragging rights at the overlook. Mr. Hendricks's voice faded with distance. The air smelled like sap and lake wind. Orange bandanas flashed between trunks as teams funneled onto the dirt. Bree had claimed the orange bandana early, tying it to her ponytail like a bright flag. "I'll be captain," she'd said at the line, quick and sure as a thrown spark. No one argued. Most people didn't when Bree's confidence snapped into place. Anaya felt the familiar tug in her chest. Back her up. Keep the peace. Don't make it weird. Mateo adjusted the forest green notebook tucked under his hoodie, then zipped the pocket and gave Anaya a half smile. He ran with a springing step that settled into careful, deliberate footing when the ground turned rooty. Jada, quiet and precise, kept the map flat against her palm, eyes already scanning contour lines and faint dashed trails. Mr. Hendricks had handed out color-coded clue cards and shiny compasses at the trailhead, reminding everyone to stay on marked paths and move as a unit. The band of orange slipped into the trees, sunlight splintering into ribbons across their arms and shoulders. They reached the first wooden post, a weathered A burned into its face, a punched pattern tool hanging by a cord. Jada set the map on a flat rock, tracing a dotted line with a blunt pencil. "Southwest for 200 meters, she murmured. Then a slight right at the big boulder. See how the contour lines tighten. The slope changes here. Bree snagged the map with a breezy grin. "Got it! We can cut across the meadow and save time." Mateo pointed toward the pale green opening beyond the trees. The grass looked quilted and harmless, but darker patches rippled when the breeze pushed. "The marsh is out there," he said. Anaya watched the tilt of Bree's mouth, the confident angle that pressed other people into agreement. Her shoulders tensed, then she remembered to count, quiet, 4-beat breath, like she practiced at home. "We should follow the markers," she offered carefully. "The rules say to stay on trail." Bree's smile thinned. "Rules say use the map wisely," she countered, already jogging for the meadow. "Anaya, with me." The meadow swallowed Anaya's shoe with a wet slurp. Cold water flooded her sock. Reeds hissed and bowed. A blue-grey heron burst upward, wing beats flinging droplets like coins. Bree laughed too loudly as she yanked her foot free, grass seeds clinging to her laces. Mateo skated along a hummock, arms pinwheeling as he rescued his scuffed high tops from another sinkhole. They scrambled back to the trail, breathless and muddy, minutes gone and a slice of shine missing from the team. Anaya shook out her ankle and told herself to smile. Back on solid dirt, Bree shook her foot like she could fling the misstep off into the trees. "It's fine," she said, laughter high at the edges. "We're still ahead." Jada reopened the map, careful and quiet, aligning the compass baseplate with the orienting arrow. The needle slid, found north, and steadied. Mateo leaned forward, hands braced on his knees to slow his breathing. He offered Anaya a look that said both yikes and we're okay. Anaya felt her heartbeat knocking in her ears, a noise that always made her want to nod and smooth things over. The old pull tugged. "Back Bree up. Don't make it weird. Hold the fragile mood together with a bright grin." She swallowed instead and tightened her pack straps. The air smelled like sun-warmed bark and sap. Birdsong threaded sharp and fine between high branches. Her sock squished, the cold fading from startling to background hum. They moved on, not as fast. No one said they'd lost ground, but everyone knew. Checkpoint B sat beneath pines that hummed with insects. A park guide in a green vest, calm eyes, flat-brim ranger hat, waited beside a low table holding rope coils and a laminated instruction card. The card read, "Tie a rope bridge knot exactly as shown. Then leave one tip you've learned for the next team." The guide raised 2 fingers in greeting. "Team Orange," he said, voice even. "You've got steady feet. This one rewards steady hands." Bree seized a rope. "I watched a video. Easy." Her fingers moved fast, twisting the strands into something that looked right until it slipped and snaked apart. Jada lifted a second coil. "If we fold a bite here and go under..." Bree cut in. "We don't have time for a lesson. Anaya, hold the ends." Anaya pinched the rope to steady the attempt. The knot cinched hard wrong and tight. Mateo winced. "That's going to jam." The guide's tone stayed gentle. "Sometimes the fastest route is the one where everyone can breathe." The words slid under Anaya's ribs and settled. Anaya loosened her grip. "Jada, show me." Jada's hands moved with patient precision. Loop, pass, tuck, dress the knot. She didn't boast. She breathed and showed. Anaya mirrored each motion, shoulders softening. Mateo kept the ends untangled, fingers quick but gentle. When they were done, the knot rested clean and sturdy in their palms, something you could trust. The guide nodded. "Rock solid." He tapped the blank tip card. "What would you tell the next team?" Anaya picked up the marker. The card looked too bright, too blank, like it was waiting for someone else's handwriting. She pressed the tip down anyway. "Check each other's work." The guide read it and gave a small approving nod. Bree's mouth made a smile that didn't settle in her eyes. "Nice. Let's hustle." They trotted back onto the trail. Heat rippled off packed dirt where sunlight cut through the canopy. Resin scented the air. Birdsong threaded overhead, thin as wire. Anaya's sock still squished, but the discomfort had shifted from irritation to reminder. She kept thinking of how the knot only held when every strand was placed on purpose, when each person could breathe. Mateo jogged beside her, tapping his watch, then rubbing the edge of his green notebook through his hoodie as if checking it was still there. Jada folded the laminated diagram into the clue envelope, her neatness unbothered by the hurry. They ran, and the day opened ahead. The trail tilted down toward a band of rippling silver. Water chatter reached them first, then the sight of flat creek stones dappled with sun. On the far bank, a clue box sat on a stump next to a small rotation sign. Another orange ribbon, Team 2 kids from their class, checked a card, waiting to swap. Bree's shoulders squared as if someone had whispered race into her ear. "We can be quick," she said. "Anaya, grab it the second they turn." Anaya blinked. "It's their turn. We're supposed to rotate." The rule printed right there was so ordinary it felt like a relief. Bree rolled her eyes just enough to sting. "You're always so slow. It's just a box." Mateo's mouth pressed into a line. His hands found his hoodie zipper and flicked it up and down once before he stilled it. Jada stared at the compass so intently her eyebrows pinched into a little tent. The creek moved around stones without arguing. Anaya stepped back from the stump. The other team glanced over. Wind skimmed the creek surface, ruffling reflections into broken fish scales. She looked at Jada's compass needle. It didn't shout, it just pointed. "We'll wait our turn," Anaya said, voice steady. "While we wait, let's recheck bearings. If the next clue says, 'Keep true north,' there might be a trick." Mateo exhaled like he'd been holding his breath too long. Jada's shoulders unhitched. Bree moved a few steps away, arms crossed, toe tapping sharp dents into the dirt. The other team handed off the box. Jada and Matteo knelt with the map, aligning the base plate as the compass needle slid to red in shed. Jada's eyes brightened. There's a magnetized ring on this one. Declinations corrected. If we follow the park sign that says N without compensating, we'll drift right of target. She tapped a faint grey line. But if we hold true north here, there's a side path that parallels the main trail. Matteo shaded his eyes and pointed. There. Through the aspen stand, you can barely see it. Leaves flashed pale green backs like coins. They took the side path. It was narrow and quiet, no bragging signposts, only a clean, honest thread between trunks. Branch tips brushed their sleeves. When it merged with the main trail again, they popped out directly at the next checkpoint, surprising a team that had followed the louder route. The station guide checked their punch pattern and smiled. Nice navigation. I like how you moved as a unit. Anaya stood in the dappled merge, breath slowing. Praise landed differently now, less like confetti, more like a weight placed where it belonged. Something small flickered in her chest, steady as a pilot light in a quiet kitchen. Not a spark begging for claps, just warmth that stayed. Matteo bumped her shoulder lightly, the almost smile that took a second to unfurl reaching his eyes. She nodded once, a measured yes to herself more than to anyone else. They didn't gloat. It was tempting, the clean arrival, the surprised look from the other team, but no one spoke it aloud. Jada capped the punch, checked the clue card again, and traced the topography with a fingertip. "Switchbacks ahead," she said. "We'll climb in shadows for a bit, then break into wind near the overlook." Matteo adjusted his laces, double knotting purple over white canvas scuffed at the toes. He tapped his simple watch, then rubbed the edge of his green notebook through his hoodie, grounding himself. Bree caught up, jaw set, ponytail high. She didn't say anything, and they didn't ask her to. Anaya counted a quiet breath, then another, letting her shoulders settle away from her ears. "Let's keep a steady pace," she said. "Water before we hit the first switchback." No one argued. The trees thinned, resin sweetness mixed with something cooler that smelled like lake wind. Far below, a ribbon of road flashed between leaves. Climbing folded time into measured pieces. Step, breathe, glance for markers, repeat. With her legs warming, Anaya's mind loosened its grip on hurry and slid toward habit. She knew the pull of Bree's confidence like a current, how quickly it could carry her into, "Yes, sure, okay." The same reflex that made group projects feel smoother had also left Anaya's throat close and hot later, words unsaid, pressing like river stones. She tried to picture leadership that didn't run on volume or speed. The knot had taught her one shape, strength built by placement, not force. The compass had offered another, truth that didn't demand anything, only pointed. She could move toward both. Matteo's breathing evened beside her. He moved more carefully over loose gravel, steps deliberate, as if a different version of himself lived inside that pace, one that didn't need to joke or hurry to belong. Anaya took a sip from her red water bottle, the coolness clearing the taste of mud from the marsh. Above the next turn, sky opened like a door. They rounded a bend, and the hillside fell away. The town lay scattered below like toy pieces, the water tower a chess rook, the middle school a pale rectangle, streets threading into a neat, shining grid. Wind lifted sweat from their skin and carried the resin sweet of juniper. Anaya stood tall without noticing, pack settling comfortably between her shoulder blades. Matteo's brows unknit as the horizon widened. For a breath, the race felt less like winning and more like finding how to be out here together. As the trail pinched between boulders, Bree moved ahead and then slowed, forcing them to glide around her, then sprint to keep up, a restless, jagged pace. "We were ahead," she muttered, low enough to be almost to herself, loud enough to be heard. "Until someone decided we'd babysit the rules." The words skittered across Anaya's skin like dry leaves. Her first impulse rose, smile, shrug, make it lighter, then fell away. She didn't need to take that job back. Jada pointed to a weathered sign and checked the map. "2 more punches," she said, "then the final tag at the overlook post." Matteo nodded. "We've run clean since the marsh." He glanced at Anaya, a brief, steadying check-in. Anaya returned it with a small nod. "Let's finish how we've been moving. Together." Bree snorted, but she didn't argue. The slope steepened. Their breaths synced for a few steps at a time, then slipped apart again, like a conversation that didn't quite meet, but also didn't fall apart. The final checkpoint before the summit sat tucked behind a lichen-blotched boulder, its post leaning a little, shadows pooling at its base. Jada's pencil nicked the card with a precise punch. "Time," Matteo said, checking his watch. The minute digits flickered, a shrug of seconds. He rubbed the edge of his notebook, then stilled his hand deliberately. Fatigue had sanded everyone's patience. Small things, the way straps creaked, the whisper of dry pine needles sounded louder. Bree's mouth tipped toward a challenge, then flattened. Anaya saw it all and let it slide past, like watching creek water split around a stone. "One more push," she said, "then we rest." The word rest tasted like something earned, not stolen. The trail above them tilted into long, clean switchbacks, sunlight painting stripes on the path. Wind moved cooler here, tasting faintly of lake. Anaya rolled her shoulders, set her feet inside her shoes, and stepped forward. They reached the final post, bright paint chipped at the edges, and tagged in, recording time with hands that trembled a little from the climb. Wind moved their hair and lifted the fatigue from their skin. The sky felt closer, but also bigger. Jada sat on a sun-warmed rock and grinned into the distance. Matteo stood with his hands on his hips, chest rising and falling, the almost smile threading real at last. Anaya's pulse steadied into a quiet metronome. Below, the town held still, small and familiar. Mr. Hendricks gathered the class into a wide circle on the rocks, voices softening automatically in the big air. "One thing you learned," he said, "and one choice you're proud of. We'll go around." He smiled, but the instructions landed like touchstones, not tests. Before the first kid spoke, Bree brushed Anaya's sleeve. "Private talk, now?" The request snagged a thread under Anaya's ribs. She followed a few steps to where a screen of juniper made a small green curtain. Wind lifted Bree's ponytail. Sun turned the orange bandana into a bright flag. Bree's eyes shone too sharp. "You didn't back me," she said, voice low and hard. "You made me look bad." Anaya's stomach tightened, then loosened. She pictured the knot that only held when each strand was placed on purpose. She pictured the compass needle, steady, unbothered by anyone's voice. "I care about you," she said, "but the jokes that land like jabs? The rules that change when you say so. I can't keep pretending it feels okay. I need space from the put-downs and pressure. I can cheer for you from over there." She nodded toward a sunny patch of rock. "You can cheer for me from where you are." Bree's face shuffled through a stack of expressions. The joke, the dare, the don't care mask, before landing for a heartbeat on something young and tired. "Whatever," she said, but the word didn't bite. She turned back toward the circle and didn't take the sunny patch. Anaya stood still. wind-braided juniper scent with the faint engine hum rising from the parking lot below. Her pulse kept even time, no longer sprinting to someone else's rhythm. Setting a boundary didn't feel like slamming a door. It felt like stepping off a path that had been eroding under her feet for a while, then finding rock. She wasn't far away. She was exactly as close as she chose to be. That difference mattered. After a breath, she could feel all the way down. Anaya walked back to the circle, the ground meeting her feet, sure and solid. The circle moved in ripples of honesty. A kid from another team admitted he'd underestimated the last hill. Someone else mentioned sharing water at the switchbacks. When it was Jada's turn, she said, "I learned details matter, but so does listening. We did better when we double-checked together." Mateo's real smile took a second to arrive and then lit his whole face. "I liked when we took the quiet trail and popped out ahead. It felt like we found a secret by paying attention." Mr. Hendricks turned to Anaya. Her mouth went dry for a heartbeat, then settled. "I learned a compass doesn't shout," she said. "It just points. I'm proud we kept our bearings, even when it was loud." Mr. Hendricks nodded once, thoughtful. "Healthy leadership is often quiet," he said. "Real teammates help each other breathe. Real friends don't keep you nervous." He let the words hang. No eyes sought Bree. No one needed the target painted. Anaya's guilt prickled, then eased away like the last sting of nettle. Silence opened like a small clearing inside Anaya. Not emptiness room. Wind slid cool across her neck. Far below, the water tower glinted dull silver. Mateo bumped her elbow and angled his chin toward the horizon, like he was asking, "You see it too?" She did. The day didn't ask anything from her but attention and breath. She could give both without shrinking. When the circle ended, buckles clicked and zippers rasped. Kids took last looks and last photos. Mr. Hendricks reminded them to mind their footing on the first steep turn. The class strung itself back into loosely gathered teams and began descending. Gravity tugged patiently at knees and calves. Conversation picked up in cautious strands that avoided sharp edges. Jada and Mateo fell into an easy pace beside Anaya, comparing the creek stones to the hopscotch squares back by school. "I still think that heron judged us," Mateo said, grinning. "It saw the marsh shortcut and was like, 'Weak choices.'" Anaya laughed once, a sound unknotted from apology. "We learned fast," she said. The scent of juniper drifted in and out, like someone opening and closing a door. A dragonfly stitched quick blue lines over the path ahead and vanished into light. They moved, not winning or losing, simply traveling together. Back at the lower trails, clusters of kids lifted pant legs to display marsh stains and pine needle tattoos on shins. Laughter pinged off bark. The guide from the Knott Station Ranger hat, tilted just so, caught Anaya's eye and offered a small two-finger salute, like he'd seen something and trusted them to carry it. Mateo returned the salute with an embarrassed half-smile that became real. Jada held up a coil of spare string she'd pocketed, already planning practice knots on the bus. At the trailhead, the afternoon had softened. Shadows stretched long across the grass. The park sign stood square and steady, letters dark against weathered wood. Mr. Hendricks swept a head count and clapped once. "Load up. Good work today." The bus doors yawned open with a sigh. Diesel murmured under polite bird chatter. Bree climbed aboard near the front and slid into a seat alone, headphones already in place. She didn't look back. Anaya felt a stitch of sadness and let it be exactly that, no extra embroidery. Mateo tugged a lemon-yellow scarf from his pack and looped it once around his neck against the bus's inevitable air-conditioning blast. "My grandma insists," he said, amused. "I don't argue with grandmas." Jada snorted softly and tightened her braid, then gestured toward the second row, window side. They slid in, packs thumping onto their knees like content dogs settling. The bus windows wore a film of day fingerprint constellations and dust. Seats squeaked as kids shifted and found places. Cool air spilled from vents. Someone at the back whispered a playlist debate. Anaya leaned her head against the glass and felt its pleasant chill. Matteo bumped her shoulder gently, then took out his black pen, tracing the edge of his green notebook with a practiced thumb. Jada uncurled the spare string and tied a clean, quick knot that made her smile. Anaya's phone buzzed 3 times, then once more. Her name lit the screen above 4 new messages. Bree's bubble blue tone, both familiar and heavy. She didn't open them. Not yet. The day had taught her the difference between reacting and choosing. She opened a new message instead and let her thumbs hover, the way she had hovered before the not card. Words arrived deliberately. I want good things for you. I'm taking a step back while I work on what's good for me. She read it twice. It wasn't a slam or a speech. It was a bearing. She pressed send, then turned the phone off and slid it into her pack with the compass. Matteo raised an eyebrow, question without push. Later, she said. He nodded like a door had closed softly somewhere far off. Not a slam, just the click of a latch set right. The bus hummed into motion, a deep feline purr under steel ribs. Trees slid by in a green-brown strobe. We should teach the knot on Monday, Jada said, eyes bright. Make it a club at lunch, 10 minutes to tie something trustworthy. Matteo laughed. We'll call it Not Knots. He grinned at his own nonsense and, instead of reaching for a louder joke to keep attention, let the grin fade to something easy. Or we can find a better name. Anaya pictured a small group at a corner table, rope ends tapping rhythm on plastic, kids learning loop, pass, tuck, dress. We'll post the tip card, she said. Check each other's work. She liked how it sounded in her mouth, neither bossy nor timid, just true. Outside, the park sign shrank and slipped behind a curve. The sky kept pointing the way it always did, an honest blue with no need to insist. Anaya breathed in and counted quietly to 4, like Jada did when she needed focus. She touched the zipper seam of her pack, where the compass pressed a small, reassuring circle. Matteo nudged her shoulder with his. She nudged back. Caring could stand at a distance and still be real. Outside the smudged window, late gold slid along the hills. The day didn't glow because they'd won. It glowed because they'd chosen how to move. In the window's reflection, Anaya saw a flicker of morning, how the whistle had snapped the day open, how she had stepped into Bree's wake without thinking. It was so small, that first decision, almost nothing. A nod, a half step, a permission given to someone else's certainty. And yet, it had tugged every choice after it toward the marsh. She didn't hate the detour. The heron's startled lift lived in her mind like a painting she wouldn't have seen otherwise. Mud, mistake, lesson braided, not ranked. The knot station's quiet table, the guide's voice like a hand on her shoulder, had felt like someone placing a tool in her palm she'd always owned but never named. Matteo had moved differently after the creek, toolless, restless, more present. She had noticed and filed it under things friendship should include, the ability to see each other changing and not panic. The bus turned, sunlight strobed across her eyelids and warmed her cheek. In her mind, the guide's 2-finger salute replayed small, unshowy. Not approval like a stamp, but trust handed over without fuss. His rope coils had lain tidy, each loop dressed, each end stowed. That quiet order had felt like respect for the day and for the people moving through it. The bus seat hummed under her, Her own small pilot light answered, yes. Belonging, Anaya decided, wasn't everyone moving at the same speed or saying yes to the same plan. It was breathing at a pace that didn't leave anyone light-headed. It was having your work checked and checking back without insult. It was being able to say, wait, the marsh looks pretty, but also looks like a trap, and not be labelled slow. She thought of the compass again, of how it tolerated being tilted, jostled, spun, and still returned to north once the world steadied around it. Her phone sat dark in her pack. The choice she'd sent was not a threat or a test. It was the gently aligned baseplate under a map, the orientation that allowed details to make sense. Matteo uncapped his pen and on the corner of his notebook page scribbled a title, Quiet Trails. He paused, then drew a tiny arrow pointing up and wrote True in tidy letters. Anaya smiled without showing teeth. Jada tied and untied the knot, fingers learning until knowing replacing remembering. If we start the knot thing at lunch, Jada said, we should make a tiny flyer. Not bossy, just, come tie something that holds. Matteo nodded. We can set out a few ropes and a card with the tip. People float in and try. No announcements in the cafeteria like we're selling timeshares. Anaya laughed. Low stakes, strong knots. She imagined Bree catching sight of them from a table across the room. In her picture, Bree didn't roll her eyes or demand the lead. Maybe she didn't come over. Maybe she did, and someone else showed her the loop pass tuck, and the rope held because instruction and listening had traded places a few times. Whatever happened then could happen then. For now, they had a plan that didn't require force. The bus's air vents sighed. Street signs ticked past, Elm, Violet, Lakeview, names she'd known since kindergarten, steady as the compass face in her pack. On the seat between them, Matteo's forest green spiral notebook with a rubber band, his compact black pen resting across the cover. Anaya's red stainless water bottle beaded with condensation. Jada's bit of white string tied in a clean bridge knot. The silver compass face peeking from Anaya's pack pocket, red needle calm. Each thing ordinary. Together, they looked like a language the three of them could read. The ache for Bree returned, light but insistent, like a muscle reminding her it had worked hard. Anaya let herself miss the easy parts, the rapid-fire jokes, the electric charge of certainty at the starting line. She also let herself remember the knots that jammed, the way rules seemed to blur whenever they got in the way of attention. Missing didn't require undoing. Caring could stand a little distance and still be true. If the distance closed later, it could close for the right reasons, not because someone sprinted across a marsh just to prove they cared. The bus hit a shallow dip. Her stomach fluttered, then settled. She pressed her palm against the pack where the compass sat and felt the cool, small circle through the fabric. The needle would keep pointing, no matter how long she ignored it. That was comfort, not pressure. Guidance wasn't a demand. It was a direction, held out like an offered hand. Matteo glanced down at his notebook again, then sideways at Anaya. I keep wanting to make a huge joke about the marsh heron electing us as its soggy ambassadors, he said, smiling. But what I actually want to write is just what it sounded like when its wings beat, like coins dropped in water. He looked surprised at his own words, then pleased. Anaya felt warmth at the edges of her eyes that wasn't tears. Write that, she said. We'll be your quiet audience. He nodded and jotted a note. Coins, water, wing sound. His shoulders loosened, almost imperceptibly, like someone new was finding room under his hoodie. He didn't look around to see if anyone was watching. The bus didn't notice. It just kept shouldering them home. Outside, the water tower's pale blue belly slid past like a slow planet. The school's low rectangle appeared on the horizon, Windows winked with late sun. Lawns unfurled, dotted with sprinklers misting silver arcs. Street names flicked by in green signs: Elm, Violet, Lakeview. Each a marker on a map Anaya could hold in her head with her eyes closed. The bus rolled, steady as a metronome, counting them toward ordinary life. "Monday," Jada said. "I'll bring extra string. We can practice with shoelaces too." Mateo tapped his pen lightly against the notebook spine. "I'll do a half-page on the creek and the magnet ring. Like how we almost trusted the loud sign instead of the quiet true north." Anaya nodded. "I'll make the tip card again and tape it to the table. Check each other's work." The words felt like a promise to their future selves. When pressure rises, choose breath. When in doubt, align to something that doesn't care whether you're winning. The bus slowed for a light. A kid a few rows up yawned and tried to hide it. No one cared. Across the aisle, someone texted furiously, thumbs a blur. Anaya didn't look for Bree. Looking wasn't wrong. It just wasn't today's job. In the glass, Anaya's reflection hovered, layered with drifting cloud. Earlier, her shoulders had crept toward her ears. Now they rested posture easy, chin lifted just enough to meet the day instead of ducking it. There was no crown here, no spotlight, just a person who knew where her compass lived and that she could choose to read it. The bus's brakes sighed as they turned into the school lot. Miss Pritchard's classroom popped into Anaya's mind, its circle of desks, sunlight patterning the whiteboard in gold rectangles, the purple marker that always squeaked on the surface. She pictured writing a prompt on Monday. Write about a time you kept your bearings. Not dramatic, just steady. Maybe she'd write, too, about how courage sometimes looked like saying, "We'll wait our turn at a creek," or like telling a friend the truth before it hardened into resentment. The doors folded open. Kids stood in a staggered wave, stretching legs and rolling shoulders. Mateo slid his pen into the green notebook's rubber band and tucked it away. "Want to walk?" he asked. "Yeah," Anaya said, surprised that the word felt like a choice instead of a reflex. They shuffled into the aisle, packs bumping, and stepped into the late day. They stepped down into sun that slid warm along the sidewalk. Lockers inside the glass entry caught and tossed the light in little rectangles. None of it had changed. It didn't have to. Anaya curled her fingers around her pack strap, felt the compass again, and smiled with her mouth closed, the kind that lived in her eyes. Two kids from science waved as they passed. "How was the park?" one asked, voice bouncing with leftover Friday energy. "Good," Anaya said. "We got muddy, learned a knot." She could have added, "We did great," or "We beat you to the checkpoint merge." She didn't. It wasn't a secret, it just wasn't the point. "Teach me the knot Monday?" the kid said. "Yeah," Mateo answered. 10 minutes, you'll be unstoppable." He said it with a grin that offered, not sold. In the glass of the trophy case, their shapes moved next to plaques that remembered other loud wins. Her reflection looked like itself, not smaller or puffed up. That seemed right. They pushed through the doors, and the smell of old gym floor cleaner gave way to evening air. At her apartment door, Anaya slid her pack from her shoulders and hung it on its usual hook. The compass in the mesh pocket caught a coin of late sun and glinted once, red needles sleeping in its clear bed. From the kitchen, a voice called her name, ordinary and good. She toed off muddy shoes and let the day settle into her bones. In the kitchen, steam curled up from a pot, and the radio murmured a half-remembered song. Anaya's mom glanced over. "Trail treat you well?" "Yeah," Anaya said, washing her hands. "We tied a bridge knot, didn't get lost." She almost told the whole story, how easy it would be to tip her mom into outrage on her behalf, to stack examples of pressure and make a small fire to warm her hands over. Instead, she said, "We found a quieter path, and it worked." Her mom's mouth softened. "That's a good sentence," she said. "Want to set the table?" Anaya did, placing forks where they fit, aligning plates like small maps that made sense together. The room held ordinary noises, running water, a loosened laugh from the radio host, and Anaya noticed how well her body matched the space. She wasn't pretending to be smaller or bigger. She was just here, pointing gently toward what was next. At his desk, Matteo angled the green notebook into the golden wedge of his lamp. He wrote, "The heron's wings coin the creek. Soft metal on soft water." He paused, listening to the words settle, and didn't push for a joke to follow. The yellow scarf hung on his chair back like a ribbon of afternoon. His smile arrived slow and stayed. On her floor, Jada looped and tucked the string again and again until her fingers no longer paused to remember. She timed herself lightly, not to compete, but to notice. Each neat bridge felt like a little promise. "I can build this, and you can check it, and we'll both breathe better because it holds." She thumbed a text to Anaya and Matteo. "Lunch table by the windows? I'll bring string." A second later, 3 typing dots appeared, and then 2 yeses. She grinned into the quiet room, the kind of grin that didn't need to be seen to count. Outside her window, the evening lined up a smart row of stars. In Anaya's mind, the overlook rose again. No crowds now, just a wind that smelled like resin and lake. The town's lights spread like a careful constellation below. She pictured setting the compass on the rock, its needle aligning as stars did. Quiet, exact, unconcerned with her hurry. She breathed once and let the picture fade. Before bed, Anaya unpacked and repacked her day pack, not out of worry, but to make a small ritual out of order. Map folded along its real creases, not the haphazard ones. Compass clipped where her hand found it without fishing. Red water bottle rinsed and placed to dry. The motions didn't control tomorrow. They reminded her she could meet it awake. She thought of Monday, of the lunch table by the windows, of hands learning a shape together. She thought of Bree, not with a wince, but with a wish, that both of them would find ways to breathe, even if the air wasn't the same for a while. She turned off her light, pilot light steady behind her ribs, and let sleep arrive without negotiation. By the door, cranberry red trail runners dusted with dried marsh mud, laces loosened. The small day pack upright on its base, compass face peeking like an attentive eye. The hallway light pooled warm around them. It looked like readiness without rush. On Monday, the cafeteria's window light pooled over a corner table where 3 pieces of string lay coiled like sleepy snakes. A hand-lettered card stood between them. Tie something that holds. Tip, check each other's work. Jada demonstrated loop, pass, tuck. Matteo held a loose end for a 6th grader who kept laughing at his own fumbles until the rope made sense under his fingers and the laughter softened into, "Oh, that's actually cool." Anaya pointed to how the strands dressed neatly, forming a simple, sturdy shape. 2 more kids drifted over, then another, the small gravity of shared attention forming a quiet island in cafeteria noise. They weren't recruiting, they were practicing. The bell would ring, math would follow. But here, for 12 minutes, hands learned a dependable path. Across the aisle, Bree walked with 2 friends, laughter turning bright and then dimming as she noticed the knot table. She slowed, eyebrow lifting a fraction, then kept moving, ponytail flicking sunlight. No one flinched. No one stared. The card on the table didn't change its message. Anaya saw Bree and didn't add meaning with a shovel. A pause could be a pause. A day could simply be a day that kept moving. She tightened one small misaligned loop for a 7th grader, then let the kid tighten the next one alone. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. She didn't jump for it. When she checked later, if she checked, she would do it with the same breath she used on the trail steady, counted, hers. "Nice," the seventh grader said as the knot seated cleanly. "Nice," Anaya echoed, and the agreement felt like something finished, not a performance in need of applause. Between lessons, Jada lifted the string knot like a tiny trophy. Matteo lifted his green notebook in return. Anaya raised the tip card. 3 simple things held up for a heartbeat. They grinned at how ordinary and good it felt. True north, Anaya thought, wasn't a single brave act you checked off and framed. It was a practice you could carry like a compass in a small pocket steady, unfancy, ready whenever the trail lifted or dipped. It didn't argue for you. It didn't draft speeches. It pointed, and you decided, and the deciding stacked into a shape you could recognize even on a loud day. She slipped the card back into her pack when the bell rang. The compass shifted with a soft click, needle finding itself again. She followed her friends into the corridor's clatter, the sound no longer a tide that could sweep her. She was not a rock against it. She was a person who could choose where to step. Long rectangles of window light lay across the hallway floor, like quiet paths. Anaya, Jada, and Matteo walked through them side by side, shadows stretching forward, not back. No one raced, no one lagged. The day kept pointing, and they kept choosing. The end.